King. Tell me, did you actually think the writers were going to give us a sweet, tear-jerking family reunion on that dark, isolated island? Absolutely not. Everything has rapidly mutated into a terrifying, suffocating trap for Liesl as she is violently dragged into the dead center of a massive, shadowy conspiracy. We all watched with bated breath over the past few weeks, hoping against hope that the man standing before her was truly her beloved son, Nathan. But no, the mask has finally slipped, and the truth is far more sinister than any of us could have ever predicted. The man parading around with Nathan's face has been backed into a corner, and he was just forced to spit out the most horrifying confession imaginable. He is not Nathan. He is Cassius, a hidden, dark twin brother who has been kept entirely in the shadows for his entire life. Just let that sink in for a moment, guys. A secret twin. Can you even begin to fathom the sheer crushing weight of that revelation on a mother's heart? I felt the air leave my own lungs just thinking about it. Liesl has spent years carrying the unbearable, heavy grief of losing Nathan, clinging to any tiny shred of hope that he might somehow, miraculously, still be alive. She remembers his smile, his honorable career as a detective, and the tragic, senseless way he was taken from her. When Cassius first appeared, he dangled that precious hope right in front of her face, playing on her deepest vulnerabilities like a master manipulator. To hear the words fall from his lips, to hear him admit that he is merely a genetic copy wearing the face of her dead son is a cruelty beyond measure. He defiled the sacred memory of her child. Her entire world absolutely shattered in that dungeon. The hope of a miraculous reunion evaporated into thin air, leaving nothing but the cold, damp stone walls of the estate and the mocking echo of Cassius's voice. If you ask me, this is one of the most emotionally devastating twists we have seen in years. But why confess now? Why drop this atomic bomb of a secret when he seemingly had the upper hand? Well, folks, Cassius is cracking under the immense pressure of this twisted charade. Playing the role of Nathan, a man who is universally loved, honorable, and pure, is a heavy burden for a man who is clearly steeped in darkness and deceit. Cassius thought he could control Liesl by wearing her son's face, but he severely underestimated the sheer psychological toll it would take on him to maintain that facade while locked in a room with a woman whose maternal instincts are sharper than a scalpel. He thought he was the mastermind in this scenario, but he is nothing more than a pawn in a much larger, far more dangerous game orchestrated by Sidwell and Cullum. Cassius is desperate, and that desperation forced his hand, leading to a confession that he foolishly believed would finally break Liesl's spirit once and for all. Let us not forget the physical reality of this nightmare. They are trapped in the gloomy, labyrinth-like bowels of the island estate. That place has always been a breeding ground for terror and dark family secrets, and this scenario is no exception. The air is damp, the walls are thick stone, and the isolation is absolute. And right in the middle of this suffocating darkness is Jocelyn, who has been swept up into this chaotic whirlwind completely by accident. Jocelyn is young, terrified, and way out of her depth, watching this intensely twisted family drama unfold right in front of her eyes. She is the collateral damage in a war she barely understands. But her presence there is crucial. She is the witness to the absolute unraveling of the conspiracy. Jocelyn might have dropped that ring as a breadcrumb for someone, maybe Carly, to find. But right now, she is locked in a cage with a grief-stricken mother and a volatile, unpredictable twin. The tension in that room is so thick, you could cut it with a knife. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, it genuinely looked like Liesl was going to succumb to the darkness. When Cassius dropped that bombshell, you could practically see the light extinguish in her eyes. The writers wanted us to believe that this was the final nail in the coffin for her sanity. She physically crumpled, her shoulders shaking, the devastating reality washing over her like a tidal wave of pure agony. And who could blame her? Any normal person would lose their mind. Any normal mother would curl up into a ball and wait for the end. Cassius stood there, soaking in her despair, completely convinced that he had won. He thought he had successfully neutralized the biggest threat to the cold fusion project. He believed that by breaking her heart, he had broken her mind, rendering her a docile, obedient prisoner ready to do the bidding of Sidwell and Cullum. Oh, how foolish. How incredibly, astonishingly stupid of Cassius. Did he honestly forget who he was dealing with? This is Liesl. She is not some fragile, weeping willow who shatters at the first sign of tragedy. She is a survivor. She is a brilliant, ruthless, calculating force of nature who has outsmarted the most dangerous criminals in our beloved town. Instead of drowning in her sorrow, she weaponized it. While Cassius was busy gloating, basking in his false sense of victory, Liesl was already 10 steps ahead. I was practically screaming at my screen. Guys, you could see the subtle, microscopic shift in her demeanor. The tears were real, yes, but the surrender was an absolute masterful illusion. She let him believe he was the alpha in the room, lowering his guard inch by fatal inch. This is where the sheer brilliance of the writing shines through. Liesl used the very thing that was supposed to destroy her, her love for Nathan as her ultimate shield and sword. She played the part of the broken, defeated mother flawlessly. She nodded, she wept, she let her posture slump. Cassius, blinded by his own arrogance and his desperate need to prove he was superior to the brother he never knew, bought the performance hook, line, and sinker. He stepped closer, perhaps to offer some twisted form of comfort, or perhaps to deliver his final set of demands regarding the cold fusion project. He thought the game was over. He thought the board was cleared, but in reality, Liesl was just arranging the pieces for a brutal, inescapable checkmate. And then, bam. The counterattack was swift, silent, and absolutely devastating. Liesl did not just fight back. She launched a calculated, lethal strike born of pure, unadulterated maternal rage. She did not use a weapon. She used her environment, her intellect, and the sheer element of surprise. When she lunged, it was not the frantic flailing of a desperate victim. It was the precise surgical strike of a predator who had been waiting patiently in the tall grass. She hit Cassius where he was most vulnerable, using his own momentum and arrogance against him. The sound of the struggle, the dust kicking up from the stone floor, the sheer physical exertion of an older woman fighting for her life and the life of a young girl, it was breathtaking. The look of absolute sheer terror and confusion on his face, the face of her dead son, was cinematic perfection. He realized in a fraction of a second that he had made a fatal miscalculation, but by then, it was entirely too late. In that one explosive moment, the entire power dynamic of the room inverted. Cassius went from the smug, controlling captor to a scrambling, panicked victim. Liesl pinned him down, both physically and psychologically. She stripped away his power, his confidence, and his leverage in a matter of seconds. I have to tell you, folks, watching Liesl reclaim her agency and turn her grief into a weapon of mass destruction was one of the most satisfying moments I have witnessed in years. She made it abundantly clear that nobody, absolutely nobody, uses the memory of Nathan against her and lives to tell the tale. The raw, guttural intensity of her survival instinct completely short-circuited the situation. And think about the massive ripple effects of this single, violent action. Sidwell and Cullum have been pulling the strings from the shadows, relying entirely on Cassius to keep Liesl in line so they can exploit her genius for their cold fusion project. They built their entire fragile house of cards on the assumption that Liesl could be emotionally manipulated and controlled. Well, guess what? Liesl just took a sledgehammer to their foundation. By neutralizing Cassius, she has effectively severed the head of their operation on the island. The grand, terrifying conspiracy that was supposed to bring everyone to their knees is rapidly unraveling, all because they underestimated the ferocious, unbreakable will of a grieving mother. Now, let us circle back to Jocelyn, who has been huddled in the corner, watching this entire bloody spectacle unfold. Can you imagine the profound impact this is going to have on her psyche? Jocelyn has always been tough. She has that fiery, stubborn blood running through her veins, but she has never seen anything quite like this. She just watched Liesl transform from a weeping, broken victim into an absolute warrior. Jocelyn is learning a terrifying, invaluable lesson about survival right now. She is seeing firsthand what it takes to survive in the dark, twisted underbelly of this town. I strongly believe that witnessing Liesl's ruthless counterattack is going to awaken a darker, more pragmatic side of Jocelyn. She is not just going to wait for a rescue anymore. She is going to start fighting dirty, just like her mentor in that dungeon. But hold on, guys, because my mind is racing with a completely different, far more terrifying theory. What if Cassius's confession and his subsequent defeat were actually part of a much deeper, more insidious failsafe? Think about it. Cassius is a twin, a genetic duplicate. What if Sidwell and Cullum KNEW, that Liesl would eventually snap? What if they wanted her to attack Cassius to trigger some sort of psychological conditioning or a secondary trap within the catacombs? We are dealing with high-level conspiracies here with this cold fusion project. I have a gut feeling that Liesl's victory, as glorious and satisfying as it was, might just be the catalyst that activates the real nightmare. What if Cassius was meant to be sacrificed all along to push Liesl over the edge, making her truly desperate and willing to do anything to escape? And let us not forget the ticking time bomb that is Carly. We know she is already plotting her own desperate, deeply personal crusade to get to the estate, using Lucas as her excuse to get on the island. She is ignoring every single warning from Valentine, charging blindly into the lion's den because her maternal instincts are screaming that Jocelyn is in danger. She absolutely refuses to wait for the police, driven by a fierce, blinding love for her daughter. Imagine the absolute chaos when Carly kicks down the door to that dungeon. She is expecting to find her daughter being held by some random thugs, but instead, she is going to walk into a blood-soaked room where Liesl is standing over the battered body of a man who looks exactly like Nathan. The collision of Carly's explosive temper, Liesl's hyper-vigilant survival mode, and Jocelyn's sheer trauma is going to create a shockwave that will rock our screens. So, where does this leave us? Liesl has violently flipped the script, transforming herself from a helpless pawn into the most dangerous player on the board. She has shattered the illusion of Nathan and broken the immediate threat of Cassius. But as the dust settles in that dark, cold dungeon, a chilling thought creeps in. Now that Cassius is down, who is coming through that door next? Will it be Carly, bringing a whole new wave of chaotic, uncontrollable energy? Or will it be Sidwell and Cullum realizing their puppet has failed and deciding to handle Liesl themselves with lethal force? The trap has been sprung, the blood has been drawn, but the true masterminds are still out there in the dark. Tell me, folks, when the real monsters finally step out of the shadows, will Liesl have enough strength left to protect herself and Jocelyn, or has she just unwittingly walked into an even deadlier snare?
Goodbye. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the GH Spoilers Daily channel.